Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of the secrets of music and magic in Ooo, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up. Let's begin. Tonight, we're setting out on a gentle journey through one of the quietest yet most powerful mysteries in the Land of Ooo. The power of music. Not just as something to hum along to, but as something alive, something that shapes magic itself. When we look closely, we notice that music is never just background and adventure time. It is woven into the very fabric of the world. A song in Ooo can comfort the lonely, summon tears from an ancient vampire, lull a monster to sleep, or even turn into a spell capable of bending another's will. And so we begin with the sound of Ooo itself. If you close your eyes for just a moment, you can almost hear it. The faint rustle of leaves in the Candy Kingdom, the rhythmic drip of water echoing through the caverns below, the distant whistle of wind over Ice King's lonely towers. All of these are the world's natural instruments. And within this world, the people of Ooo add their own voices, their own melodies. From Marceline's bass guitar to Finn's small, clumsy flute, each sound becomes part of a vast and mysterious symphony. What makes this world so special is that music never feels like decoration. It feels essential. Just as fire illuminates the dark and water sustains life, music in Ooo has the power to carry emotion, memory, and even magic. There's a certain dreamlike quality to it, as though every note is connected to the unseen forces that linger behind the ruins of the old world. Think of the times we've heard a song in Adventure Time. Almost always it happens at a moment when something deep stirs beneath the surface. A character is searching for something, remembering something, or needing to express what words alone cannot hold. In those moments, the show slows down, the pace softens, and we're invited to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts. One of the most beautiful things about Ooo is that it remembers its own history through music. This is a world born from ruin, shaped in the shadow of the Mushroom War. Much of what once was has been forgotten. Cities have fallen to the earth, technology lies rusting under vines, and stories have faded with time. But music lingers. It carries memories that would otherwise be lost. A few soft chords from Marceline's guitar, and suddenly the world before the war feels close again. A simple whistle from Finn's flute, and the innocence of a child's hope seems able to wash away centuries of darkness. Even the landscape seems to sing in its own way. The howling of wolves in the grasslands, the bubbling songs of candy people in their cheerful town squares, the lonely echoes of wind through shattered skyscrapers. If you listen closely enough, the Land of Ooo itself is humming a lullaby. A song of survival, of healing, and of beginnings and endings woven together. Music in Ooo is never still. It is always doing something. It can comfort, it can warn, it can enchant. It can bring two people closer or drive them apart. It can be playful, like Ida Bowles' cheerful jingles, or heavy with grief, like Simon's half-forgotten tunes from a past life. Every melody is alive with meaning. And in this world, meaning is never without magic. There's something soothing about the idea that sound itself is part of the world's magic system. Not spells pulled from dusty tomes, not incantations bound by rigid rules, but pure sound, vibration, rhythm, resonance. It feels older than anything else. Almost as if before there was language, before there was even memory, there was music. And perhaps Ooo has simply carried that primal truth further than we can see. When Finn strums a simple tune, he is not merely playing notes. he is reaching into something ancient, something elemental. When Marceline sings her heart, she is shaping not only her own story, but the emotions of everyone listening. When magical beings weave songs to enchant or mislead, they are drawing upon the very same power, only bending it to their own design. It makes you wonder, is every song in Ooo a kind of spell? Perhaps not in the way wizards would describe it, but in the way that every note carries the ability to shift reality, even if only for a moment. Music makes the unbearable bearable, the distant close, and the forgotten remembered. And in a world still healing from apocalypse, that power might be the strongest form of magic left. As we drift deeper into this thought, let's linger for a moment on the silence between notes. In adventure time, silence is never empty. It is the canvas against which a melody shines. Think about the pauses in the Marceline songs, where her voice fades and we are left holding our breath. In those gaps, the silence itself feels enchanted, holding space for memory, grief, and comfort to settle. The music doesn't just exist in sound, it exists in the space it creates within us. And so the Sound of Ooo is not simply the songs of its people, but the balance of sound and silence, weaving together a gentle rhythm that guides life forward. It is both playful and sacred, both childlike and ancient, and it reminds us that sometimes the most powerful forms of magic are the ones we hardly notice. When you listen closely to Ooo, you notice that each corner of the land has its own musical voice. The Candy Kingdom, with its cheerful streets and playful citizens, often echoes with light-hearted tunes. Peppermint Butler may hum something quiet and strange. Bubblegum's experiments may buzz with rhythm, and the candy people themselves, so innocent and silly, seem to move through life as if every step could be a dance. Their world is saturated with sound that feels sweet, almost childlike. But beneath that lightness, we sometimes sense the deeper hum of science and power that Princess Bubblegum keeps hidden. Even here, music seems to carry double meanings. Surface joy with shadows lingering underneath. Travel farther north, and the Ice Kingdom has its own lonely symphony. The wind howls across the jagged cliffs, a constant moan through frozen towers, and at the heart of it all sits Ice King, whose songs are clumsy, tender, and aching. His attempts at music are not elegant, but they are sincere. In his croaky voice and awkward rhymes, we hear both the remnants of Simon Petrikov's humanity and the sorrow of a mind unraveling. The Ice Kingdom soundtrack is one of melancholy, a place where even joy is tinged with cold isolation. Yet in that sadness there is a strange beauty. The Ice King's songs, however silly, remind us that music doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful. Move into the Fire Kingdom and the tone changes again. Here, music feels harsh, volatile, like sparks leaping from burning wood. The roars of flame, the crackling of lava rivers, and the pounding rhythms of fire elementals create a fierce energy that is more chaotic than peaceful. But even here, music holds power. Think of Flame Princess, whose emotional outbursts often feel like bursts of sound and light colliding. Her passion is like music, too, loud, unpredictable, and transformative. The Fire Kingdom reminds us that music does not always soothe. Sometimes it erupts, it shatters, it consumes. But even then, it is a form of expression, a raw truth made audible. What's fascinating is how these different voices, the sweet, the lonely, the fiery, all weave together into Oo's larger symphony. Just as characters from across the land come together, clash and connect, their sounds create harmonies and dissonance that mirror their relationships. Adventure Time doesn't always spell this out, but you can feel it. The show itself often layers its soundscape in ways that blend natural noises with music, almost blurring the line between what is part of the environment and what comes from the characters themselves. And then there are the quiet places. The desert stretching out with only a faint whistle of sand, the endless ocean with its soft, lapping waves, the darkened forest where owls call into the night. These places remind us that silence is part of the music, too. In a way, Ooo is like a living instrument, with every mountain, every tree, every ruined building shaping the echo of sound. And it is within this great instrument that characters play their personal songs, adding their voices to something far larger than themselves. Perhaps that is why music in Ooo feels so enchanted. Because it is never isolated, it always resonates with something bigger. The land, the history, the people, even the cosmos beyond. When Marceline plays a song, it doesn't just affect those in the room with her. It ripples outward, connecting to memories of war, to Simon's broken past, to the loneliness that hangs over centuries. When Finn's little flute sings out, it touches not just Jake beside him, but the very idea of innocence, the fragile thread of hope that Ooo desperately clings to. This connection between the personal and the universal is what makes the sound of Ooo so magical. Every melody, no matter how simple, carries with it a weight of meaning. A few notes strummed absent-mindedly on a guitar can awaken centuries of memory. A playful tune whistled in a meadow can momentarily heal the scars of apocalypse. In Ooo, music does not just exist. It acts. It transforms. There is also something important about who holds the music. Not everyone in Ooo is a musician, but those who are seem to carry special roles in the story. Marceline, the vampire queen, is as much defined by her songs as she is by her powers. Ice King, despite his madness, turns to music again and again as a way of expressing what he cannot otherwise say. Finn, in his youth, reaches for music when words feel clumsy. Even BMO, with its robotic voice, finds joy in playful jingles that express its identity. These characters remind us that music is not simply background flavor. It is a defining trait of those who hold it close. And perhaps that is the deepest truth hidden in the Sound of Ooo. Music is memory. It is emotion. It is identity. Without it, the land might fall silent, stripped of its soul. But with it, even the most broken characters find a way to keep going. The land itself, scarred by destruction, feels alive because music continues to echo through its valleys and towers. If you imagine lying on the grassy hills of Ooo under a soft night sky, you might hear it all blending together. Marceline's distant bass, Finn's little flute, Jake's lazy hum, the laughter of candy people, the mournful cry of Ice King, the rustle of trees, and the low rumble of faraway fire. All of it swirling into one long, endless song. That song is Ooo itself, a world reborn from ashes, telling its story through sound. When we think about music as the soul of Ooo, it's important to remember how deeply it reflects the world's history. Long before the adventures of Finn and Jake, long before the Candy Kingdom rose or the Fire Kingdom burned with its eternal flames, the Mushroom War reshaped the earth. That devastation left ruins, silence, and a broken landscape. Yet even in that silence, music endured. Perhaps it was hummed by survivors in the rubble. Perhaps it echoed from creatures who adapted to a new world. Perhaps it lingered in the winds that carried whispers through hollow skyscrapers. Whatever its source, music became one of the ways Ooo remembered what was lost and imagined what could still be found. This is why music often feels more ancient than even the most powerful magic. Spells in Ooo may belong to wizards, potions, or strange rituals, But music seems to belong to everyone. It needs no book, no arcane formula. It flows naturally from those who feel. It comes from pain, from joy, from longing. The world may have been rebuilt with candy and magic and elemental forces, but the one thing that truly holds it together is sound, the vibration of memory carried through time. Take a moment to recall the quieter characters who use music as part of their lives. BMO, for example, often sings tiny songs, almost like a child humming before bedtime. These songs may seem playful and simple, but they carry a deep warmth. They remind us that even an artificial being, built from the machines of the old world, finds comfort in melody. For BMO, music is identity. It bridges the gap between machine and friend, between toy and family member. In those cheerful jingles, BMO expresses a kind of joy that words alone could never capture. And then there are characters like the nymphs, who weave music into something mysterious, enchanting, and dangerous. Their songs are not just pleasant. They are spells that call and control. Through them, we see the other side of Oo's relationship with music, the way sound can blur the line between art and sorcery. These melodies remind us that every note holds power and that power can soothe, but it can also ensnare. Music in Ooo is never neutral. It always carries intention, even if its singer does not fully realize it. It's also worth noticing how the creators of Adventure Time use music not just within the story, but as part of the storytelling itself. When Marceline sings, the show pauses. The animation slows, the colors soften, and we are given space to simply listen. These moments break the usual rhythm of the series. They invite us to stop chasing action and instead rest in emotion. The sound design of the show mirrors this truth. Ooo is built to be listened to, not just watched. Its world is carried as much by silence and song as it is by dialogue and action. In many ways, the Sound of Ooo is a lullaby for the audience as much as for the characters. Children watching might not know the depth of Marceline's sorrow or the haunting echoes of the mushroom war hidden in her voice, yet they feel it. Adults watching might recognize the layers of grief in Simon's broken songs, yet even they are soothed by the calm rhythm of a guitar chord. This dual effect, comfort and melancholy braided together, is what makes music in Adventure Time feel timeless. It resonates with anyone, no matter where they are in their own story. Imagine drifting across Ooo on a quiet night, carried by the gentle back of a cloud or the stretch of Jake's magic body. You'd hear the sounds of each kingdom as you passed, the laughter of candy people, turning into the hush of forests, then into the lonely whistle of snow across icy peaks. You'd hear distant humming, perhaps a song of sorrow carried on the wind, and all the while the land itself would be singing, not loudly, but in subtle tones, like a heartbeat that reminds you the world is alive. This is the Sound of Ooo, layered, shifting, endlessly alive. There's also a sense that music in this world bridges the natural and the supernatural. It doesn't just exist in the background. It changes reality. Think of Finn's little flute, simple and fragile. When he plays it, he is not just filling silence. He is shaping mood, calming spirits, and sometimes reaching creatures who do not understand words. His music creates peace where there was chaos. It reminds others of gentleness when violence felt inevitable. This ability is magical, even if no wizard would call it a spell. In truth, it may be more powerful than a spell because it works not by force, but by resonance. Marceline's music, on the other hand, carries history. Every note she plays on her bass is heavy with centuries of experience. She has lived through wars, loneliness, heartbreak, and love. Her songs do not just express her story, they transmit it. When we listen, we carry part of her memory with us. This is why her music can move even the hardest hearts. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to feeling. In this way, her songs are like incantations that keep her past alive and remind others of their own buried emotions. So when we speak of the Sound of Ooo, we're not only describing a soundscape, we're describing a language older than words, one that every being in the land understands, even if they cannot explain it. It is the language of vibration, of rhythm, of the soul. When a lullaby is sung, it carries calm across species and kingdoms. When a haunting tune is played, even monsters pause to listen. Music speaks where speech fails, and in a fractured world like Ooo, that makes it the purest kind of magic. As we rest in the thought of music as a language, it becomes clear that Ooo itself listens. The land does not merely echo sound, it responds to it. Songs awaken memories in those who have lived for centuries. Melodies stir emotions, even in creatures who seem mindless or cruel. Silence after a song feels charged, as though the very air has absorbed the music and is carrying it onward. The world of Ooo is sensitive, as if sound vibrates, not only in ears, but in stone, in water, in magic itself. This is why so many of the show's most powerful emotional moments arrive through song. When Marceline and Ice King share their fragile duet, it is not just a musical number. It is history, heartbreak, and love condensed into sound. We see two souls divided by magic, yet still reaching for one another. The words may be simple, but the melody carries everything left unsaid. Music bridges the gap between Simon and Marceline, between memory and reality, and in that moment, the Land of Ooo holds its breath, listening. Even the simplest songs hold extraordinary weight. A hum by Finn as he wanders a forest, or a playful rhyme by Jake as he cooks breakfast, can feel like more than filler. They remind us that in this world, joy is as important as sorrow, that every note, whether silly or serious, is a thread in the larger fabric of life. Ooo does not separate the profound from the playful. Instead, it teaches us that even the silliest tune can carry comfort, and even the deepest ballad can carry hope. What is striking, too, is how music often arrives when words are not enough. Characters in Ooo do not always speak directly about their feelings. Instead, they turn to melody. Marceline cannot tell Finn and Jake the depths of her loneliness, but she can sing it. Ice King cannot explain the fracture in his mind, but he can howl it into a microphone. Finn cannot always say what being a hero means, but he can whistle it into the wind. These songs are not side stories. They are the truest expressions of who these characters are. Music also connects generations. In a land shaped by apocalypse, where the past is often hidden or forgotten, songs act as bridges. A melody hummed today may echo something from before the Mushroom War. Lyrics written by a vampire centuries ago may still resonate in the heart of a human boy. Through music, Ooo remembers itself. It refuses to let memory slip away completely. Even if entire kingdoms crumble, songs continue to carry their essence forward. There's something tender about this idea that long after buildings fall and artifacts rust, sound will linger. A song is not bound to stone or paper. It can drift on the air, pass from one voice to another, from one generation to the next. This is perhaps why Adventure Time so often leans on music as a narrative anchor. It knows that sound is the most enduring form of story. In the end, every kingdom, every character, every magical being will pass, but the song will go on. As you imagine lying beneath the stars of Ooo, it's easy to sense that truth. The constellations above feel silent, yet if you listen closely, you might believe they are humming too. The night sky itself seems to have rhythm, a soft pulse of light and stillness. This cosmic quiet blends with the land's lullabies, creating a harmony that is both infinite and intimate. Music connects not only people and kingdoms, but earth and sky, present and past, dream and waking. And perhaps that is why it so often feels magical. Not because of any spell book or incantation, but because of the way it transforms the listener. It softens anger. It deepens memory. It binds strangers. It reaches across lifetimes. Music is the magic of empathy, given shape. In Ooo, empathy is not an abstract concept. It is a force that heals wounds, repairs bonds, and gives characters strength to keep moving forward. Music is simply how that empathy makes itself heard. As we drift further into the music of Ooo, our path gently leads us to one of its most haunting voices. Marceline, the vampire queen. More than 1,000 years old, a wanderer across ruined lands, a child of both human and demon blood, and yet above all else, a singer. For Marceline, music is not a pastime. It is survival. It is memory. It is the one language she has always trusted when words failed her. Think back to the very first times we hear her sing. The world around her seems to grow quiet, as if listening. The boldness and mischief of her character falls away, and we glimpse something much more fragile. Every note carries a weight heavier than her playful banter ever reveals. Through music, Marceline shows us her truest self, a soul carrying centuries of grief and longing, but also flashes of love, humor, and hope. Marceline's songs are diaries written in sound. She rarely shares her thoughts openly. Instead, she lets them spill through her guitar. When she sings about loneliness, it is not a distant sadness. It is the ache of centuries, spent outlasting friends, watching kingdoms rise and fall, and holding on to memories long after others have forgotten. Her songs give shape to this ache. They are like letters sent across time, written to people who may never hear them, but who are always present in her heart. One of the most powerful themes in her music is memory. For Marceline, memory is both a gift and a wound. She remembers the Great Mushroom War not as a story told by others, but as a lived experience. She remembers walking with Simon before the crown took him completely. She remembers being small, vulnerable, carrying her toy Hambo through the wreckage of a broken earth. These memories are too heavy to speak aloud. But in song, she can release them. Music becomes her way of carrying the unbearable, turning pain into something that can be shared, even if only in fragments. There's a reason why Marceline's bass guitar feels so symbolic. Made from her family's heirloom battle axe, it embodies the balance between destruction and creation. A weapon reshaped into an instrument. Violence softened into expression. Every time she plays, she reclaims that legacy, choosing music over war, emotion over aggression. The guitar itself is a story, and in her hands it becomes both shield and confession. Through its strings, she channels her past, while refusing to let it define her entirely. When Marceline sings about Simon, about the man who once cared for her before the crown's curse consumed him, the tenderness in her voice is unmistakable. These songs are not just about longing. They are attempts to preserve a person who has nearly disappeared. Through music, she keeps Simon alive. Not the broken ice king who stumbles across Ooo, but the man who once promised to protect her. Every lyric is a plea to memory itself. Do not let me forget him. Do not let the world forget him. And yet her songs are never only about grief. They are also about healing. Marceline often begins her music in sadness, but by the end there is a shift. The act of singing transforms sorrow into release, and release into connection. Listeners are drawn into her story, and in that shared space, loneliness becomes companionship. In Ooo, where isolation is a constant shadow, Marceline's songs create fleeting moments of unity. They remind others and herself that she is not entirely alone. Even when Marceline sings with a playful edge, the undercurrent of memory is still there. A teasing lyric to Finn and Jake may seem light-hearted, but often it hides something deeper. The bittersweet truth that playfulness is a shield. Behind her jokes and her mischievous grin lies a heart that has been broken more times than it can count. Her music lets those fractures show, not as weakness, but as proof of her endurance. What is most fascinating is how her songs affect those around her. Finn, young and still learning the weight of the world, often listens with wide-eyed wonder. Jake, more laid back, still finds himself quieted by her melodies. Even Ice King, in his fractured state, responds to her music in ways words could never reach. This is the magic of Marceline's songs. They bypass reason. They speak directly to the heart. In doing so, they heal, even if only for a moment. And so Marceline's music becomes more than personal expression. It becomes a form of spell work, though she may never call it that. Each song weaves emotion into the air, reshaping the feelings of those who hear it. The sorrow of centuries becomes a balm for others. The weight of memory becomes a gift. The act of singing turns pain into power, loneliness into connection, and silence into meaning. To understand Marceline's music is to understand the way she moves between worlds. She is neither fully human nor fully demon, and so she has always existed at the edges of belonging. Music becomes the bridge she builds for herself, a way to step across boundaries that her lineage will never let her fully escape. Through her songs, she can claim both sides of her heritage without being defined by either. The demon's rage can turn into thundering chords, the human's vulnerability into soft, trembling lyrics. It is through melody that she unites the pieces of herself, if only for the length of a song. Think of how rare it is for Marceline to speak openly about her father. Her relationship with Hunson Abadir is marked by distance, disappointment, and wounds that never seem to fully close. Yet when she sings, the truth slips out more easily. The longing for connection, the resentment, the sadness of a daughter whose father never gave her what she truly needed. All of it is there, tucked between notes. Music becomes the voice she cannot use in conversation. It says the things she is too guarded to admit aloud. This is part of why her songs feel so honest, even when the lyrics are simple. They bypass the armor she wears in daily life, the smirks, the sarcasm, the pranks, and they reveal the tender heart beneath. In many ways, Marceline's music is her truest self. When she plays, we see the child she once was, the friend she still longs for, the woman who has endured centuries of loneliness. Her melodies are mirrors, showing us the person behind the vampire queen persona. There's also something deeply symbolic about the way others respond to her music. Finn, in particular, is shaped by these encounters. As a human boy in a world where humans are nearly extinct, he often feels the same sense of isolation that Marceline carries. Her songs give him permission to feel deeply, to embrace sadness without fear. In listening, Finn learns that being a hero is not only about strength, but about vulnerability, too. Marceline's music teaches him that to grieve, to long, and to hope are all forms of courage. We also see how her music creates unlikely connections. Take her relationship with the Princess Bubblegum. Theirs is complicated, filled with tension and distance. But whenever music enters the scene, barriers begin to soften. A shared song opens space for honesty that neither of them can summon in ordinary conversation. Music becomes the common ground where love, regret, and longing can exist without defense. In these moments, we are reminded that Marceline's songs are not only about her past, they are about the possibility of reconciliation, about bridges that can still be rebuilt. Even Ice King, trapped in the fog of the crown's curse, is reached by her melodies. When Simone flickers through his fractured mind, it is often Marceline's music that pulls him forward. Her songs act like threads, tugging at the man buried beneath layers of madness. It is through these rare, tender moments that we see the depth of her devotion. She cannot bring Simon back with words, but with music, she can reach a part of him that still remembers. For Marceline, each song to Simon is a promise that she will never stop carrying his memory, no matter how much the world forgets. Music also allows Marceline to confront time itself. As an immortal, centuries slip past her in ways no mortal could endure. Friends grow old, kingdoms crumble, and yet she remains. That kind of loneliness could easily harden her into indifference. But instead she chooses music as her anchor. Her songs capture moments that would otherwise vanish. They freeze memories in sound, preserving them against the erosion of time. In this way, her guitar becomes a kind of time machine, not one that changes the past, but one that keeps it alive. What makes this even more magical is how the audience is drawn into this process. When we listen to Marceline, we don't just hear her story, we feel it. Her music allows us to carry a piece of her memory ourselves. In that way, her songs spread the burden of immortality. She doesn't have to hold her memories alone, because everyone who listens holds them too. This act of sharing is itself a form of healing. It softens the weight of centuries by turning them into communal experience. So much of Marceline's magic is in this quiet alchemy. Pain transformed into beauty, memory turned into melody, solitude reshaped into connection. Her songs remind us that to feel deeply is not a weakness, it is a form of power. In Ooo, where magic can be destructive and chaotic, her music is a gentler kind of spell, one that works not through force, but through resonance. It changes nothing and everything at once. And perhaps that is why her songs linger so long after the final note fades. They are not just performances. They are spells of remembrance, woven into the air, echoing in the hearts of those who listen. Even in silence, the memory of her music continues to work, carrying us deeper into her story. When we think about Marceline's most intimate songs, we find ourselves drawn again and again to those quiet, unguarded moments when she allows herself to be vulnerable. One of the clearest examples is the lullaby she sang to Simon, back when she was still a frightened child in the ruins of the old world. That soft, trembling melody, almost more humming than song, was her way of asking for comfort while at the same time giving it. She had nothing else to offer but her voice, and Simon, burdened by the crown's creeping curse, held onto that song as if it could keep him tethered to his humanity. This dual nature of Marceline's music, both a plea and a gift, is something that follows her throughout her life. She sings to express her loneliness, but in doing so, she comforts others who share that feeling. She writes songs to give voice to her pain, and in the process, her listeners find words for their own. Music becomes the place where Marceline is not alone anymore. Even when she performs for herself in some quiet cave or on a rooftop under the moon, the act of singing transforms solitude into connection. We might say this is the truest form of magic her songs contain. Unlike spells or incantations, which bend the world toward the user's will, Marceline's music bends the listener toward understanding. It does not force change, it invites it. And that invitation can be more powerful than any spell book. It reaches into the hidden corners of memory, stirring feelings that words alone might never awaken. The depth of this can be seen when Marceline confronts her own past through song. Take her memories of her childhood with Simon. In the quiet moments where fragments of those days surface, she turns to music as a way of keeping them alive. Each lyric becomes a fragment of that bond, preserved against the erosion of time. When she sings about wanting him to remember her, we understand that this is not just sentiment. It is survival. Without music, those memories might fade into silence. With it, they remain, alive in sound. There is a particular poignancy in the way her songs shift between tenderness and anger. Sometimes her lyrics carry the sharp edge of resentment. Anger at Simon for leaving, anger at her father for his failures, anger at the world for being so fragile. But even in these fiery moments, the act of turning emotion into music softens its destructiveness. The anger becomes art. The pain becomes something beautiful, something that does not consume her, but instead reshapes her. Marceline is not just expressing feelings, she is transmuting them, alchemizing them into melody. And yet her music is not only about grief. There are playful songs, too, cheerful, mischievous melodies that show the other side of who she is. These lighter tunes remind us that memory is not only sorrowful. It also carries joy, laughter, and the warmth of friendship. By singing these songs, Marceline shows that even in a world haunted by apocalypse, life is still worth celebrating. The same guitar that bears witness to her grief also rings out in delight, reminding us that healing is not only about processing sadness, but also about embracing moments of joy when they appear. Her choice of instrument is meaningful as well. The bass guitar, often associated with depth and resonance, suits her perfectly. Its notes are not sharp or hurried. They thrum like a heartbeat, grounding her music in something primal. The bass is also a rhythm keeper, a foundation for other sounds to build upon. In this way, her instrument reflects her role in the world. She is often the grounding force for others, even when she feels adrift herself. Through her music, she holds space for connection, memory, and healing, just as her bass holds the rhythm steady in a song. Another fascinating layer of her music is how it interacts with place. When Marceline plays in a cave, the echoes become part of the performance, weaving her voice into stone. When she sings by the river, the water seems to hum along, rippling to a rhythm. These details show us that her songs are not confined to the air. They inhabit the world around her, infusing landscapes with memory. Ooo itself becomes a collaborator in her music. It is as if the land remembers along with her, carrying her melodies into its very soil and sky. This connection between music and landscape also ties Marceline to the broader theme of Ooo as a world built from layers of history. Just as ruined cities hide beneath forests, her songs hide stories beneath their surface. A cheerful tune may carry an undercurrent of sorrow. A love song may mask centuries of loss. In this way, Marceline's music mirrors the land she lives in, beautiful on the surface, but always carrying echoes of what came before. It is worth reflecting on how other characters recognize this power even if they cannot fully articulate it. Bubblegum may roll her eyes at Marceline's dramatic performances, but she still listens. Finn may not always understand the depth of the lyrics, but he feels their weight. Even Jake, and ever the Joker, shows moments of quiet respect when Marceline plays. The people of Ooo seem to instinctively know that her music carries something essential, something older and more enduring than any spell. Her music also highlights the fragility of memory itself. In a world scarred by apocalypse, Stories are easily lost. Without records, without libraries, much of the old world has faded. But Marceline's songs stand as living archives. Each one is a fragment of history, encoded not in books or stone, but in sound. And sound has its own kind of permanence. A melody once heard can stay in the mind forever, humming beneath the surface, even when silence returns. In this way, Marceline becomes not just a musician, but a historian of the heart. She may not write her memories down, but she sings them, ensuring that they live on in the memories of others. Her music carries the legacy of those she has loved and lost, giving them life beyond their time. Every performance is both remembrance and resurrection, and perhaps this is why her songs strike us so deeply. They remind us that memory is not just about the past, it is about the present act of keeping the past alive. To sing is to resist forgetting. To listen is to become part of that resistance. Marceline's music asks us not only to hear her, but to remember with her. As we draw deeper into Marceline's songs, another truth begins to emerge. Her music is not only personal, not only about her own story, but about something larger, the very nature of memory itself. In Ooo, where so much has been forgotten, where ruins of the old world lie buried under forests and deserts, her songs act like glowing threads stitched through the fabric of time. They bind together what might otherwise unravel. When she sings, she keeps not only her own history alive, but the memory of a world that once was. Consider how music behaves differently from other kinds of memory. A story can be forgotten if it is not written down. A painting may fade, but a song has a way of living on in those who hear it. Even a single line of melody, a hum remembered in the quiet of night, can carry the weight of centuries. Marceline seems to know this instinctively. She may not write long histories or chronicle the wars and treaties of Ooo, but she knows how to pass on something even more essential, the feeling of what it was like to live through those times. Her songs do not merely tell us about the past, they make us feel it. This is why her music is so closely tied to healing. For Marceline, who has lived through griefs that most of us cannot imagine, music offers a way to release sorrow without being destroyed by it. Each performance is a form of catharsis, a ritual of letting go while holding on. And for those who listen, the effect is mirrored. Her listeners, too, find themselves eased by the melodies. They may not share her exact pain, but they recognize the emotions woven into her lyrics. In this recognition, healing takes root, not by erasing the wound, but by transforming it into something beautiful. At times, her songs act almost like lullabies, not only for Simon long ago, but for all who hear her. They soothe, they comfort, they allow the restless mind to quiet. But unlike a traditional lullaby, which often hides sorrow behind gentle words, Marceline's music does not disguise its pain. Instead, it lays it bare, and somehow, that honesty is even more comforting. There is reassurance in knowing that even someone as powerful and seemingly untouchable as the vampire queen carries wounds, and that she too must find ways to soothe them. Her music also holds a strange power over silence. In a land as strange and magical as Ooo, silence can be unsettling, too empty, too vast. But when Marceline plays, silence is transformed into something sacred. The pauses between her notes are just as meaningful as the notes themselves. In those spaces, listeners find themselves leaning in, breathing softer, waiting. The silence becomes part of the spell, teaching us that memory is not only found in words and melodies, but in the quiet spaces around them. And then, of course, there is the role her music plays in relationships. With Bubblegum, Her songs are often the bridge back to closeness. They carry confessions that might never be spoken otherwise. A shared song can heal years of distance in ways that conversation cannot. With Finn, her songs become lessons, passing on wisdom without ever sounding like lectures. With Simon, her music is a lifeline, tying her to the man he once was, holding back the tide of the crown's madness. Each relationship in Marceline's life is shaped and softened by her music, as though her songs are the true language of her heart. What's remarkable is how universal this feels. In our own world, too, music often carries the memories we cannot otherwise hold. A melody from childhood can transport us back in time instantly, more vividly than any photograph. A song shared with someone we love can bring their presence back, even after they are gone. Adventure Time mirrors this truth through Marceline. Her songs remind us that memory does not live only in the mind. It lives in the body, in the heart, in the air that vibrates when we sing. And yet, for all this, Marceline's music is never portrayed as perfect or polished. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes raw, sometimes silly. That imperfection is part of its magic. It shows that memory itself is not neat. It is tangled, uneven, filled with gaps and contradictions. By allowing her songs to be rough around the edges, Marceline makes them real, and in doing so, makes them even more powerful. There is also an important duality in how her songs can both hurt and heal. Some of her music stirs old wounds, bringing back emotions that might have lain dormant. But even this is a form of magic. Pain, once acknowledged, loses some of its sharpness. It becomes manageable. In this way, Marceline's music teaches us that healing does not always mean erasing sorrow. Sometimes it means carrying it more gently with the help of a song. Perhaps the most moving truth of all is this. Marceline herself may never realize just how magical her music is. To her, singing is simply what she does. It is how she processes, how she exists. She may not think of it as a spell or a power, and yet it functions as one. Her melodies ripple outward, touching lives in ways she cannot measure. That unintentional magic, born not of ritual but of honesty, may be the most powerful of all. And so when we listen to Marceline's music, we are not only hearing the story of a vampire queen. We are hearing the echoes of an entire world. The grief of apocalypse, the tenderness of friendship, the ache of immortality, the fragile hope of love. Her guitar strings vibrate with the memory of Ooo itself, carrying its history, its wounds, and its joys into every note. In this way, Marceline becomes more than just a character. She becomes a bard of her world, a keeper of its songs, a guardian of its memory. Through her, we are reminded that music is not just sound. It is history, healing, and magic, all at once. And maybe, when we finally close our eyes and drift toward sleep, her songs stay with us still, echoing faintly, like the heartbeat of Ooo itself, carrying us gently into dreams. There is something otherworldly about the way music moves through Ooo. It is not only a human craft, not even just a tool of vampires or adventurers. It belongs also to beings far older, far stranger, whose very nature is tied to sound. When these creatures sing, the air itself seems to change, the boundaries of reality bending as though notes could unlock doors that words never could. Their music is not performance. It is essence. One of the most haunting examples of this comes from the river nymphs. Their voices ripple like the water they dwell within, carrying a shimmering quality that seems to bypass thought and speak directly to the heart. When they sing, listeners feel a pull, a longing that is difficult to resist. It is as though the song remembers you, as though it knows your secret fears and dreams. The effect is mesmerizing, but also dangerous, for to follow that sound is to risk being swept into currents from which one may never return. This is music as enchantment, the kind of spell that does not strike with force, but with subtle suggestion. It reminds us of the old tales of sirens luring sailors with their voices. But in Ooo, the feeling is gentler, more ambiguous. The nymphs are not portrayed as cruel tempters, but as beings whose nature is simply inseparable from music. Their songs are not traps in the traditional sense. They are expressions of what they are. To resist them is like trying to resist the pull of the tide itself. There is a quiet beauty in this. It shows us that music in Ooo can be both gift and hazard, both balm and snare. For the nymphs, song is survival. It sustains them, gives them power, allows them to shape the world around them. And yet, to those who stumble upon them, that same song may feel like a danger, a magic too strong for human hearts to bear. We can see echoes of this same truth in other creatures as well. The elemental beings born from the raw forces of fire, ice, candy, and slime often express themselves in sound that borders on music. A crackling flame has its own rhythm, an icy wind its own whistle. Sometimes these elemental voices swell into something more deliberate, almost like singing. In these moments, we glimpse how music might be woven to the very structure of existence. It is not something created from nothing, but something always already present, waiting to be heard. Think of the way the Ice King, even in his madness, sometimes hums. His humming, awkward and broken though it may seem, carries faint echoes of Simon. It is not quite a song, not quite a spell, but something in between, a fragment of his true self slipping through the cracks of the crown's curse. In this sense, even he partakes in the music of beings touched by otherworldly forces. His song is not enchanting in the way of the nymphs, but it still bends reality, if only for a heartbeat, reminding us that there is a man beneath the ice. What makes these otherworldly songs so fascinating is that they rarely feel contrived. They are not written, not rehearsed. They emerge naturally, as though music is the language these beings were born to speak. When a nymph sings, she is not performing for an audience. She is expressing her essence, and whoever hears it becomes part of that expression. This creates a sense of intimacy that is almost unsettling. To hear such a song is to be drawn into the life of the being itself, as if the boundary between self and other has briefly dissolved. This raises a subtle question. Is the magic in the song itself, or is it in the act of listening? Perhaps the nymph's melody is only half of the spell, and the listener's heart completes it. The longing, the enchantment, may be as much a reflection of the listener's desires as of the nymph's power. Music, after all, is always a meeting place, half given, half received. The magical songs of Ooo remind us that every enchantment is a dialogue, shaped not only by the singer, but also by those who hear. The songs of these beings also reveal something important about the nature of Ooo. Magic is rarely about domination alone. It is about resonance. A spell can force, but music invites. It pulls rather than pushes. This makes it uniquely powerful, for it can change a heart without ever seeming to try. A quiet persuasion, that unspoken invitation, lingers long after the last note fades. If we listen carefully, we begin to notice that many of Oo's most mysterious beings have music threaded into their very being. The magic man, for instance, with his strange blend of whimsy and cruelty, often twists sound in unsettling ways. His voice sometimes rises into sing-song tones, taunting and mocking, turning ordinary words into something that feels like a broken melody. For him, sound itself becomes a tool of chaos, a reminder that music can disorient as easily as it can comfort. Even in his madness there is rhythm, a deliberate playfulness that unsettles those around him. In sharp contrast, the cosmic owl's presence hums like a song just beyond the edge of hearing. When he drifts into dreams, his voice is not musical in the conventional sense, yet it carries a resonance that feels melodic. His words echo like distant chants, rippling through the subconscious with a rhythm that lingers even after waking. If the nymphs represent the intoxicating beauty of song, the cosmic owl represents its mystery, a melody that cannot be fully grasped, one that slips through the fingers like mist. His dream songs are not about memory or comfort, but about inevitability, fate, and the quiet pull of destiny. Even the lich, in his own terrifying way, carries traces of this truth. He is not a singer, and yet his voice is so resonant, so commanding, that it borders on music. Each word he speaks vibrates like a dark chant, filled with rhythm and intention. When the lich speaks, it feels less like conversation and more like invocation, as though the universe itself is being tuned to his frequency. There is an unsettling symmetry here. Where Marceline turns music into healing, the lich turns sound into destruction. Both reveal that the power of resonance can move hearts or shatter worlds, depending on who wields it. Another subtle example lies in the forests of Ooo, where creatures like the tree spirits hum low, droning notes that ripple through bark and leaves. These sounds are not performance, but vibration, the living voice of nature itself. If one were to lie beneath the boughs long enough, one might hear melodies formed by wind through branches, by roots shifting in the soil. These are songs without words, perhaps older than language itself, expressing the life of the earth in tones too deep to ignore. Adventure Time often hints at this kind of elemental music. Fire crackles in patterns, ice whistles as it fractures. Even the candy people, in their cheerfully odd way, often burst into song without prompting. These are not isolated quirks, but reminders that in Ooo, music is not separate from life. It is woven into every layer of reality. To listen closely is to hear the world itself humming. This is why encounters with otherworldly songs can feel so profound. They are not simply sounds made for pleasure, but expressions of essence. The nymph sings because she cannot not sing. Her very being is woven into her melody. The cosmic owl speaks in dream chants because fate itself vibrates through him. The lich's words thrum with destructive power because annihilation is his nature. In each case, music is not ornament, but truth. It is interesting, too, how mortals respond to these songs. Some, like Finn and Jake, are drawn in with curiosity, not fully understanding the weight of what they hear. Others, like Bubblegum, recognize the danger and resist, knowing that to surrender fully might mean losing oneself. These responses show us that music's magic is not one-size-fits-all. It interacts uniquely with each listener, amplifying their desires, fears, and longings. A melody that soothes one heart may undo another. The ambiguity of this is what makes otherworldly songs so compelling. They are neither purely good nor purely evil. They are invitations, mirrors reflecting back what lies inside the listener. In this sense, they are perhaps the purest form of magic in Ooo, neutral, powerful, and deeply intimate. And maybe this is why Adventure Time lingers on music so often. It shows us that sound is more than entertainment. It is a force of nature, a language of beings older than kingdoms, older even than the Mushroom War. To listen is to step briefly into their world, to hear with more than ears, to feel with more than the heart. Think for a moment about the elementals, those ancient beings tied to the very foundations of Ooo, ice, fire, candy, and slime. Each of them carries a resonance, a rhythm that reflects their element's nature. While we don't always hear them burst into traditional song, their powers sing in subtler ways. Ice whispers with its sharp, crystalline tones, like glass chimes in a frozen cathedral. Fire roars and crackles in a percussive rhythm, every spark a staccato beat in an endless drumline. Candy buzzes with bright, cheerful cadences, a saccharine chorus almost too sweet to endure. And slime, well, its music is more of a gurgle, a slippery rhythm that reminds us that even the oozing and bubbling of primordial matter carries a song if we're willing to listen. Now imagine these elemental songs overlapping, harmonizing, or clashing. When ice meets fire, their melodies grind against one another, tension hanging like dissonant notes. When candy and slime interact, their rhythms bubble into strange syncopation, playful but unsettling. This isn't just metaphor. Adventure Time treats the world itself as though it is constantly resonating with these elemental melodies, and the balance of Ooo is a kind of symphony. If one instrument overpowers the rest, the song becomes unstable, too much ice, and the song turns brittle, fragile, and still. Too much fire, and it becomes overwhelming, consuming everything in its rhythm. Harmony is survival. Music then becomes the secret language of balance. Marceline might strum her bass and remind us of love and loss. The nymph might sing her alluring tune of temptation. But beneath them all, Ooo itself hums with elemental refrains, ensuring that even when kingdoms rise and fall, the deeper melody carries on. We also see music slipping into dreamscapes, shaping realities that are not bound by time or place. When Finn dreams of the cosmic owl, the dream hums with resonance. And though there may not be instruments, there's a rhythm that shapes the vision. Dreams themselves, in Adventure Time, often feel like songs, fragmented, looping, haunting. They echo the way a melody can replay in your head endlessly, even without a source. That's part of what makes the cosmic owl so unsettling. He embodies this endless loop, this feeling of a song you cannot shake, a chorus stuck in your soul. There's also a cosmic scale to consider. Look at Prismo, the Wishmaster who exists outside linear time. His entire being feels like an improvisation, a jam session of existence itself. Though he doesn't sing, his playful tone, his relaxed rhythm, feels musical in its delivery. He bends reality with the ease of a jazz musician shifting keys, riffing on possibilities, exploring new progressions. With him, the universe feels like a song being improvised moment to moment, shaped by whim and imagination rather than rigid structure. What's so striking is that in Ooo, music isn't confined to traditional instruments or lyrics. A flute or a bass might carry obvious melodies, but the truly otherworldly beings reveal that music is deeper than that. Music is vibration, resonance, frequency. The nymph lures with melody. The cosmic owl haunts with dream chants. The lich chants with annihilation. The elementals hum with the voice of nature itself. The tree spirits drone with the pulse of the forest. Prismo bends reality like a playful tune. And through it all, listeners respond not just with their ears, but with their souls. It's why music can act as a bridge in Ooo. Mortals connect with the divine through sound. Magic users shape reality by channeling rhythm and pitch. Beings beyond time and space express their essence through resonance. Music, then, is not merely an art form. It's a universal code, a hidden architecture of reality. When someone plays, sings, or even speaks with enough intention, They are tapping into that deep structure, momentarily aligning themselves with the heartbeat of existence. And maybe that's the hidden lesson, tucked inside the whimsical songs of Adventure Time. They may sound silly at first, playful ditties sung by candy people or improvised jams by Jake. But underneath, there's a suggestion that every song, no matter how small, participates in this greater symphony. A candy jingle may echo the candy elemental's cheer. A wolf's howl may echo the primordial rhythms of the wild. Even Finn's clumsy flute playing ties him, however imperfectly, to this universal chorus. What makes the songs of otherworldly beings stand out is their purity. Unlike mortals who sing for joy or sorrow, these beings sing because it is who they are. Their music is not chosen, it is essential. Listening to them is like brushing against truth itself, even if that truth is frightening, bewildering, or overwhelming. To encounter such a song is to be reminded that the universe hums with forces far greater than us, and yet somehow invites us to join the chorus. The true weight of these otherworldly songs becomes clear when we notice how often they change the course of events. In a world shaped by conflict and survival, music is rarely neutral. It can soothe a restless creature, like Finn's flute once did, or it can ensnare a wanderer, like the nymph's melody. When the cosmic owl appears in dreams, his presence carries a musical inevitability, shaping destinies that mortals cannot escape. His dream songs, though never sung outright, are powerful enough to echo into waking life, pushing characters toward choices they might otherwise never have made. Consider how easily a single tune can ripple outward. A melody sung in solitude might end up binding two characters together, or even unraveling the bonds they thought unbreakable. When Marceline's songs reach Simon, they remind him of who he once was, pulling him back from the cold edge of the Ice King's madness, if only for a fleeting moment. Now imagine that magnified on a cosmic scale. The song of a primordial being could nudge entire kingdoms into war or peace, love or despair. The inhabitants of Ooo may not always recognize it, but they are constantly swayed by these unseen refrains, drifting with the currents of a larger composition. And yet, for all its potential to manipulate, there is gentleness in much of this music. The nymph may lure travelers, yes, but her song is not violent. It is persuasive, coaxing, like the hush of waves against the shore. Even the elementals, when their powers collide, create more of a trembling harmony than an outright explosion. It is almost as if the music of these beings reflects the truth that power in Ooo is rarely absolute. It bends, it flows, it finds harmony, even amidst conflict. One of the most subtle examples comes from the forests of Ooo. There are moments when the background itself begins to sing, though not in the way we might expect. A breeze passing through the hollowed trees makes a low, haunting whistle. Leaves shiver like a chorus of faint chimes. The buzzing of insects forms a drone, steady and ancient. These natural songs remind us that not all beings who sing in Ooo are characters with names or faces. The land itself is alive with music, humming along with the pulse of the universe. This natural chorus, quiet but persistent, becomes the backdrop against which all adventures unfold. What's especially interesting is how mortals respond when they encounter these higher songs. Most of the time, they don't fight against them. Instead, they listen, they sway, they are carried along. It's as though part of them recognizes these melodies as older than themselves, and resisting would be like trying to stop the tide. Finn, for instance, rarely dismisses a strange song. He listens with wide eyes, sensing its meaning even if he can't articulate it. Marceline, attuned to music already, finds herself drawn to the beauty and sorrow in these voices. Jake, playful as ever, often tries to harmonize, treating even the most mysterious tunes as an invitation to join in. And that may be the most human response of all, to harmonize, to hear something larger than yourself and try to sing alongside it, even if your voice wavers. Adventure Time reminds us again and again that music is a way of reaching across barriers, between people, between species, even between dimensions. The otherworldly songs of Ooo can be frightening or strange, but they also extend an invitation. They say, you are part of this melody too. Add your voice. Find your note. When we think of the great battles of the series, we often imagine swords clashing or spells colliding. But listen more closely, and you'll notice that music plays its part there as well. When the Lich rises, his chanting is a song of death. When Finn rallies courage, he hums a tune under his breath. When Marceline fights, her bass growls and wails, turning combat into performance. Even war in Ooo becomes a kind of music, the loudest and most chaotic, yes, but still shaped by rhythm, still echoing with resonance. And when the dust settles, when silence falls, it is often music that restores balance. A quiet song, a lullaby, a few notes played on a humble flute. This cycle, discord followed by harmony, is the very pattern of music itself. Conflict and resolution, tension and release, the same principles that guide a melody guide the very fabric of Ooo. Now, sleepyheads, let us drift toward something gentler. We've wandered through the haunting echoes of otherworldly songs, the kind that feel eternal and vast, too big for a single person to fully grasp. But in Ooo, not all music belongs to cosmic beings or ancient powers. Sometimes it comes from the simplest of places, from a boy with a flute held carefully in his hands, playing a melody that isn't polished or perfect, but real. Tonight we turn our attention to Finn and the innocent magic that rises whenever he brings his music to life. Finn is not a trained musician, or he is not Marceline, pouring centuries of memory into every chord, nor is he a siren-like nymph, weaving magic from perfect melodies. Finn's music is clumsy at times, uneven, even a little silly, but perhaps that is why it carries so much weight. His songs are born not from practice, but from feeling. When Finn plays, he does not think about rhythm or technique. He simply expresses, in the most direct way possible, the emotions that sit inside his heart. And because of that honesty, his music carries a quiet power that cannot be faked. Think of the first times we hear Finn with his flute. The notes are hesitant, almost fragile. They do not command attention the way Marceline's bass might, nor do they overwhelm the listener with grandeur. Instead, they invite. They lean gently into the air like a hand outstretched, asking if someone would like to join. The sound of Finn's flute is a reminder of his soul itself, kind, hopeful, and vulnerable. Even in a post-apocalyptic land filled with magic and danger, his music becomes a thread of purity running through the chaos. What is most striking is how others respond to it. Finn's companions don't laugh at his playing, even when the notes waver. Jake, ever supportive, sometimes hums along or dances to the rhythm. Princess Bubblegum, analytical as she is, listens with soft eyes, understanding that the music comes from a place she cannot quantify with science. And even creatures who might otherwise lash out or flee are soothed by the gentle melodies. It's as if Finn's flute bypasses language and reason altogether, speaking directly to the heart. In a way, his music reflects the innocence of childhood. Many of us remember what it feels like to hum a tune without worrying about how it sounds, to sing softly in the dark just because it feels good to fill the silence. Finn never lost that impulse. Even though he is a hero carrying the weight of battles, heartbreaks, and responsibilities, the act of playing music reminds us that beneath it all, he is still a boy seeking connection. His flute becomes the vessel for that childlike wonder, offering little lullabies to himself and those around him. There is also something deeply symbolic about the instrument itself. A flute is small, lightweight, almost fragile. It does not roar like a drum or command like a horn. Instead, it whispers. It calls for patience, for leaning in close to truly hear. In a world where so many characters use music to assert power or influence, Finn's flute chooses a different path. It does not dominate. It invites. That alone makes it magical. And yet, the magic within Finn's flute is not just metaphorical. There are moments in the series where his music seems to carry effects beyond the ordinary. Beasts are calmed, tensions are softened, and emotions shift. Whether by accident or by intention, Finn taps into that deep current of Oo's musical energy. Unlike Ash, who twists sound into selfish spells, Finn channels music in its most innocent form. His melodies are unshaped by ego, and because of that, they can reach places that darker magic cannot touch. One of the most beautiful aspects of Finn's music is that it mirrors his growth. Early on, his tunes are simple, almost awkward. As he matures, his songs deepen, not because he practices more, but because his experiences shape the emotions he pours into them. A broken heart can make a melody softer, more haunting. A moment of triumph can make it brighter, more buoyant. The flute becomes a diary, not of words, but of notes carried on the air. When Finn sits alone, perhaps on a hill, as the sun sinks low over the Land of Ooo and lifts the flute to his lips, there's a hush that falls. The world, for a moment, leans in to listen. Birds perch nearby, curious. Jake stretches out on the grass, smiling quietly. The wind itself seems to still. And in that fragile silence, the melody drifts out, not grand, not flawless, but pure. This is the sound of innocence, of hope, of a boy reminding himself that even in a broken world, beauty can still be made with breath and intention. There's a reason that Finn's flute feels so different from every other source of music we've explored so far. Where others use music to reach into the past, to lure, to control, or even to express powers beyond comprehension, Finn's flute reaches into the present moment. It has no agenda beyond simply being. Each note is like a footprint in soft sand. It doesn't try to last forever. It doesn't carve itself into stone. It simply appears, gentle and temporary, and then drifts away. And yet that fleeting quality is part of its magic. For just as a lullaby exists in the moment of its singing, Finn's flute becomes a gift that asks for nothing in return. It's this quality that allows his music to bring comfort to others in ways that words sometimes cannot. Think of how often Finn struggles to put feelings into speech. He is brave and outspoken when charging into battle. But when it comes to revealing vulnerability, his fears, his hopes, his love, he hesitates. The flute becomes his translator. Through its soft tones, he tells stories he cannot articulate. A gentle melody can say, "I'm here with you," or "I'm sorry," or even "I understand," without needing a single word. In Ooo, this has special weight because music resonates with the soul in ways language cannot. Take Marceline's songs. They cut straight to the heart because they emerge from deep memory. Finn's flute works in a similar way, but instead of memory, it conveys sincerity. Even if he never plays a perfectly pitched note, the honesty of his intent shines through. The creatures and people around him recognize that truth instinctively, and it softens them. One quiet example comes in moments when Finn is alone with Jake. Jake is laid back, easygoing, and often plays the role of comforter himself. But when Finn plays the flute, Jake doesn't interrupt with jokes or chatter. He simply listens. Sometimes he hums along, but more often, he just lets the melody wash over him. That kind of silence is its own form of respect. It shows us that Jake, who has seen Finn grow from a boy into a young man, understands that the music carries something beyond playfulness. It's Finn's soul expressing itself. Princess Bubblegum, too, responds in her own way. Her world is scientific, calculated, filled with equations and responsibilities. But music, particularly Finn's music, touches her differently. She knows it can't be measured or replicated in the lab. It's not about chemistry or formula. When Finn plays, she sometimes allows herself to step outside the endless burden of ruling and inventing. And for a few moments, she simply feels. His flute reminds her that there is a kind of magic in the universe that science doesn't have to explain in order for it to matter. Even BMO, who is himself a living embodiment of rhythm and play, listens with reverence. Though BMO loves to sing and create, Finn's flute holds a different weight because it isn't about performance. It's about honesty. For a character like BMO, who longs for companionship and imagination, Finn's music is a reminder of why play and creativity exist in the first place, to connect hearts in ways words cannot. And then there are the creatures of Ooo, trolls, beasts, and even wild, magical beings sometimes pause at the sound of Finn's flute. The harshness in their eyes softens, the tension in their stance loosens. Music, especially innocent music, cuts through barriers of fear and aggression. Where swords and fists might escalate, the soft melody of Finn's flute diffuses. It is not always enough to stop danger, but in the moments where it does, we are reminded that gentleness has a power all its own. There's something almost symbolic in this, as though Finn's flute is the counterbalance to Oo's darker forces. Where the Lich represents annihilation through words and power, Finn represents renewal through music and presence. Where Ash manipulates magic through selfish chants, Finn soothes with selfless tones. Where Marceline carries the weight of centuries in her songs, Finn simply breathes out a melody for the moment he is living. And perhaps that's what makes his music magical in the deepest sense. It is tied to the present. It does not anchor itself in grief or demand power. It simply exists as a reflection of hope. Finn's flute reminds us that the smallest, simplest acts of beauty can still ripple outward, shaping the world in quiet ways. Even a note that vanishes into the air is never truly gone, for it may linger in memory and feeling, or in the softened heart of the one who heard it. There is a quiet magic in how Finn's music does not simply exist within him, but seems to resonate outward as though the very Land of Ooo hears his melodies and answers back. Watch closely in the moments when he plays alone in the wilderness. The air grows still. The grass leans just slightly, as if bowing toward the sound. Birds that once fluttered restlessly begin to settle, perched calmly in the branches. Even the creatures that usually skitter or growl appear to pause, listening with a kind of instinctive reverence. His flute, though ordinary in its construction, becomes a key that unlocks harmony between him and the natural world. Perhaps this is because Finn himself is so deeply tied to Ooo. Unlike Marceline, who straddles the line between humanity and vampiric immortality, or Princess Bubblegum, whose essence is bound to candy and science, Finn is simply human. He is rare in this post-apocalyptic land, a reminder of what once was, but also a symbol of resilience, of life continuing forward. His innocence, his persistence, his ability to find joy even in hardship, all of this places him in tune with the fragile but enduring song of Ooo itself. So when he raises the flute to his lips, the world listens not because the notes are flawless, but because the heart behind them mirrors the very spirit of the land. It is no coincidence that his melodies often come in times of reflection. When the battle is over, when the noise has subsided, Finn finds himself drawn to create small pockets of peace. A hilltop at sunset, a clearing in the forest, a campsite under stars. These are not grand stages, but intimate spaces where music feels at home. And in those spaces, the flute acts almost like a bridge, connecting Finn to something larger than himself. The melody drifts outward, joining with the wind, blending with the rustle of leaves, mixing with the quiet chorus of nighttime insects. It is as if nature accepts his invitation and joins in, weaving itself around the fragile human tune. This sense of connection is what makes Finn's music so different from magic that seeks control. When Ash casts spells with rhythm and sound, he is imposing his will upon the world, bending reality to his desires. Finn, by contrast, asks nothing. He offers a song, and the world responds willingly. His flute becomes a dialogue rather than a command. It whispers, "I am here. Will you meet me in this moment?" And the world answers with harmony. This is the heart of innocent magic. We also see how Finn's music reflects his relationships. When he plays for friends, it becomes a shared experience, weaving bonds tighter than words. His melodies may carry inside jokes with Jake, quiet comfort for bubblegum, or simple cheer for BMO. Each tune becomes unique to the moment, never to be repeated exactly, but remembered by those who are present. In this way, the flute becomes a kind of diary, not just for Finn's personal emotions, but for the connections he builds. Every time he plays, he writes an invisible entry into the shared story of his friendships. But perhaps the most profound relationship revealed through Finn's flute is the one he has with himself. In a world where heroes are expected to fight and protect, there is little space for a young boy to simply be still. Playing the flute becomes an act of self-care, a way for Finn to release emotions that might otherwise stay locked inside. The notes he breathes out carry his joy, his frustration, his sadness, and his wonder. For a boy learning who he is, surrounded by responsibilities far beyond his years, that act of release is a quiet form of survival. It is his way of telling himself, "You are more than a hero, you are a person with a heart that deserves to sing." This is what makes his music so healing, not just for others, but for Finn himself. And healing in Ooo is a rare kind of magic. There are potions, spells, and scientific concoctions that can mend wounds, but to soothe the spirit requires something deeper. Finn's flute provides that. When he plays, even his own heart softens, finding rest in the gentle notes he creates. The world outside may remain chaotic, but within that song, there is a pocket of stillness where peace takes root. Over time, we see Finn's flute become almost symbolic of his journey from boy to young man. Early tunes are light and playful, carrying the curiosity of a child discovering the world. Later, they grow softer, tinged with melancholy as Finn begins to wrestle with heartbreak and loss. And yet, no matter how the melodies change, they never lose their innocence. Even when he has been hurt, his music does not grow sharp or cruel. It remains gentle, offering instead a reminder that innocence is not the same as naivety. Innocence can survive even in a world scarred by pain. It can endure, adapt, and continue to create beauty without denying the truth of sorrow. So in a way, Finn's flute is not just an instrument. It is a symbol of what makes him who he is. A boy who chooses kindness even when surrounded by darkness. A boy who expresses himself honestly even when words fail. a boy whose magic does not lie in commanding power, but in inviting harmony. And through this flute, we see that the truest magic in Ooo is not always grand or cosmic. Sometimes it is as simple as a child's melody carried into the night, reminding all who hear it that innocence still exists, and that even in the most uncertain times, there is beauty in breath, in sound, in song. As Finn's journey stretches across seasons, we notice how his music evolves alongside him. In the earliest days, his flute playing is almost like a game. The notes tumble out quickly, sometimes cheerful, sometimes clumsy, with the carefree abandon of a child. They are songs of discovery, made without expectation, like doodles drawn in the margins of a notebook. These melodies mirror the boy who ran into battle with boundless energy, laughing in the face of danger simply because adventure called to him. But with time, those notes grow slower, more thoughtful. After heartbreak, after loss, after the sting of learning that even heroes cannot fix everything, his music begins to carry you weight. A few drawn-out tones, held just a little longer than before, reflect the ache of growing older. Finn does not always speak of these feelings, for he often masks them with courage or humor. Yet when he plays, the truth slips out. His flute becomes a safe place where sorrow and hope can exist together, interwoven like threads in a single fabric. This change is subtle, but it tells us something important about Finn's growth. He never abandons the innocence that defines him, but he allows it to deepen. His music does not ignore the shadows he encounters. Instead, it embraces them, folding them gently into the melody. In this way, Finn's flute offers a lesson that is almost universal. Innocence is not fragile glass that shatters at the first sign of pain. It is a light that can withstand darkness, and even after sorrow, it continues to glow. We also see how Finn's music shapes the way others view him. To those who fight alongside him, he is a hero, brave and unyielding. But when they hear his flute, they are reminded that he is still human, still vulnerable, still yearning for connection like anyone else. This balance makes him a more complete figure in their eyes. Marceline, who often hides her pain beneath wit and sarcasm, finds comfort in Finn's honesty. Princess Bubblegum, who bears the burden of leadership, is reminded that not everything must be calculated or controlled. Even Jake, who seems so effortlessly wise, recognizes that Finn's music carries truths that cannot be explained away. There are moments when Finn's flute even seems to change the course of events. A beast ready to attack might pause, tilting its head at the sound. A restless friend might calm, reminded of gentler times. Even Finn himself sometimes finds his path clearer after playing, as though the act of making music aligns his heart with his choices. This influence is not loud or dramatic, but quiet, understated, like ripples moving outward across still water. Yet those ripples reach far. They soften hearts, shift moods, and remind all who hear them of the simple truth that beauty can exist even in fragile moments. And in the grander picture, Finn's flute holds a symbolic place in the Symphony of Ooo, where Marceline's bass roars with memory, where the nymphs' songs tempt with power, where ash twists sound into selfish spells. Finn's flute remains the purest voice. It does not dwell on the past or grasp at the future. It belongs entirely to the present, unburdened, honest. That may be why it resonates so strongly. It reflects a kind of magic that is both humble and enduring. If we listen closely, we can see how Finn's flute playing also mirrors the very structure of Adventure Time itself. The series balances whimsy and sorrow, laughter and loss, never staying in one tone for too long. Finn's music does the same. Sometimes it is bright, playful, like the silly songs he hums on adventures. Other times it is soft, wistful, carrying the weight of what he cannot yet say aloud. In this way, his melodies feel like distilled reflections of the show's own heart, encapsulating its ability to be light and heavy all at once. And perhaps the greatest magic of all lies in the way Finn's flute reminds us of the power of small things. In a world filled with cosmic being, ancient wars, and forces that can reshape reality itself, one might think that only grand gestures matter. But Finn's music proves otherwise. A simple tune, played quietly on a handmade flute, can heal, can connect, can linger in memory long after it fades from the air. It tells us that sometimes the smallest acts carry the deepest meaning. So when we picture Finn in those rare, still moments, sitting beneath a starry sky, flute in hand, the notes floating upward into the night, we glimpse not just a boy, not just a hero, but a symbol of what it means to remain tender in a world that often demands hardness. His flute is more than wood and holes. It is his heart made audible, fragile, and strong all at once. Not all music in Ooo is gentle, or healing, or born from a place of innocence. Just as a melody can soothe a restless heart, it can also ensnare one. And just as a lullaby can guide a listener into peaceful sleep, a darker tune can bend them toward another's will. Tonight, as we move deeper into our story, we turn toward this shadowed side of Oo's soundscape, where music is no longer only an expression of love or memory, but a tool of manipulation, power, and control. When we think of music as magic, it is easy to imagine it as something pure, something uplifting, like Marceline's bass or Finn's flute. But in a land as strange and vast as Ooo, every force that can heal can also harm, depending on who wields it. Music, after all, bypasses logic and reason. It reaches straight into the emotions. And that very ability makes it dangerous in the wrong hands. Because what could be more powerful than the ability to stir someone's heart without their permission? One of the clearest examples of this lies in the character of Ash, Marceline's ex-boyfriend. Unlike Marceline, whose songs are full of sincerity and vulnerability, Ash's relationship with magic and with music leans toward the selfish and manipulative. He is not a musician in the traditional sense, but he uses chants, rhythms, and spells in ways that mimic the effects of music. There is cadence in his words, almost a performance in the way he casts, a theatricality that feels uncomfortably close to song. Ash's magic is flashy but hollow. Where Marceline plays to express what is inside her, Ash performs to control what is outside him. He even manages to trick Marceline into parting with her cherished stuffed animal, Hambo, by using a spell laced with persuasion and charm. The act is not musical in the way a lullaby is, but the intent is the same: to weave a sound or rhythm that weakens another's defenses, making them pliable. It is a reminder that sound, when weaponized, can strip someone of their agency. This stands in stark contrast to the music of characters like Finn or the nymph, whose songs awaken emotions naturally, without force. With Ash, there is no invitation, no respect for the listener's choice. His spells override, commanding rather than guiding. And here lies the unsettling truth. When music and magic merge in this way, they become not an expression of self, but a means of domination. The world of Ooo seems to understand this duality. Music is depicted not just as beautiful, but as dangerous, something that can wound as easily as it can heal. Even the way certain characters respond to song shows how susceptible beings can be when sound bypasses their defenses. Think of the way sirens are portrayed in myths beyond Ooo, voices so alluring they draw sailors to their doom. In Ooo, echoes of that mythology emerge, reminding us that a song can be both gift and curse, depending on the singer's heart. This theme is not limited to ash. We also see shadows of it in the way magic users chant incantations. Incantations, at their core, are rhythmic speech, meant to be repeated, meant to be intoned with a rise and fall like music. Whether summoning fire or opening portals, the cadence matters. The voice is not just carrying words, it is carrying power. In a way, every spell is a kind of song, and the more convincing the rhythm, the more effective the outcome. When we place this alongside the gentler uses of music we have already explored, it creates a layered picture of Oo's soundscape. Music can be memory, healing, connection, but it can also be a weapon, subtle and invasive. This duality reflects something profound about the world itself. Ooo was born from destruction, from a cataclysm that left beauty and ruin tangled together. So it makes sense that its music, too, contains both sides, the tender and the cruel, the healing and the harmful. And perhaps that is what makes this darker side so chilling. We expect magic spells to be dangerous. We expect fireballs and curses to wound. But when that harm comes cloaked in sound, something usually associated with comfort, it feels almost more unsettling. To be enchanted not by a threat, but by a melody, is to be disarmed before one even realizes it. That is the true danger of music, twisted into control. Ash's selfish use of magic is more than just a story about one troublesome character. It reveals how music and rhythm can be corrupted, how something usually tied to joy and intimacy can instead be bent into a sharp edge. Think of the way Ash carries himself, smug, theatrical, always seeking to impress rather than connect. Even in the cadence of his voice, there's an element of performance, as though each word he utters is staged for an audience. That rhythm, that musicality, becomes another mask for manipulation. For Marceline, who treasures honesty in music, this betrayal cuts deep. Her songs have always been vulnerable, a way of opening her heart. Ash twists that same principle into a tool of deception, turning rhythm into a trap rather than an invitation. When he enchants her to surrender Hambo, he is not just stealing an object. He is stealing trust, stealing memory, stealing the emotional lifeline that toy represented. The act is devastating not only for Marceline, but for us as listeners, because it shows music's potential for cruelty when paired with selfishness. And Ash is hardly alone in this. Across Ooo, we find echoes of similar patterns. Beings who use music or rhythm not to express themselves, but to dominate others. Magic Man, for instance, thrives on chaos and cruelty. His spells are less lyrical than Ash's, but still carry a strange cadence, a warped rhythm that unsettles those around him. His magic is unpredictable, yet its delivery often feels deliberate, like a mocking song performed at someone's expense. In this way, even he embodies the darker role of sound, using it not to heal, but to destabilize, to unmoor his victims from reality. Then there are beings whose very existence seems tied to sound as a form of control. The ancient sleeping magi of life-giving, though more comedic in tone, speaks with an otherworldly rhythm that feels hypnotic. His words drone like a chant, wrapping the listener in a cadence that is hard to resist. While not overtly malicious, the effect reminds us again of how vulnerable the mind can be to sound that flows in steady, repeated patterns. It lulls, it pulls, it guides without permission. This dual nature of music and rhythm also finds resonance in myth beyond Ooo. Throughout human history, chants, hymns, and songs have been used to inspire devotion or submission. Monks chant to create focus. Armies march to drums to maintain unity. prophets sing hymns to bind followers to their cause. These practices show that music has always been able to stir the collective heart, not just the individual one. And while this can be uplifting, it can also cross into the realm of control, blurring the line between inspiration and manipulation. Ooo mirrors this truth, where Marceline sings to remember and Finn plays to comfort. Others intone and chant to command. The rhythm itself becomes a weapon, a repeated phrase, a steady beat, a melodic loop. They work their way past thought, straight into instinct. And in a world where magic is already volatile, attaching it to something as primal as rhythm makes it doubly potent. Perhaps this is why music in Ooo feels so alive, so charged with meaning. It is not merely background decoration, not simply a tool for setting mood. It is an active force, capable of shaping minds and bending wills, and when that force is abused, the results are unsettling. Watching Ash deceive Marceline or hearing the eerie tones of a magical chant, we are reminded that beauty and danger can share the same form. What matters most is intent, the heart behind the sound. The unsettling side of this truth lies in its subtlety. A fireball streaking across the sky announces itself clearly. A blade in the dark reveals its threat in steel and shine. But a melody, a rhythm, those slip in unnoticed, sweetened by familiarity, disguised as comfort. That is why the dark side of music feels so insidious. It hides its edge behind a song. And yet this darker perspective is not meant to diminish the beauty of music in Ooo. Rather, it completes the picture. Without acknowledging its potential for harm, we cannot fully appreciate its power to heal. The two are intertwined, as inseparable as light and shadow. Just as the Land of Ooo itself was born from destruction and renewal, its music, too, carries both voices, the lullaby and the spell, the comfort and the command. So when we think of Ash and others who wield sound for selfish gain, we do not simply see villains twisting an innocent art. We see reminders of the delicate balance that exists in Ooo and perhaps in ourselves. For the same power that can lift a weary heart can also be used to bind it if intent turns inward instead of outward. That is the dangerous magic of sound. When we look closely, we can see that Ooo holds many echoes of ancient myths where music was a tool of enchantment. The most striking parallel is the myth of the sirens, whose voices lured sailors to their doom, not through violence, but through irresistible beauty. In Ooo, there are hints of this same danger, where songs or sounds do not simply entertain but enthrall. Music becomes a doorway into vulnerability, a place where the listener's defenses lower without them even realizing it. One example is the family of creatures known as the Marauders, who, in certain interpretations and extended lore, are said to use chants and drum beats to coordinate their attacks. Though not explicitly magical, their rhythm creates a psychological spell, an atmosphere of inevitability, a sense that their victims cannot escape. The beat itself becomes oppressive, pounding into the mind like a command. This is not magic in the glowing, spark-filled sense, but it is no less a form of control. The body moves to rhythm, whether we want it to or not, and in that lies a subtle kind of domination. The same principle emerges in smaller, quieter examples, like enchanted forests, where whispers rise on the wind. In some episodes, music seems to seep from the environment itself, trees humming softly, winds carrying tones that feel too deliberate to be chants. These sounds, though faint, often lead characters astray, drawing them deeper into mystery. The listener does not question why they follow, they simply do, as though the music bypasses choice altogether. It is a gentle but eerie reminder that not all melodies exist for comfort. Some are traps woven into the air itself. Ash's actions, then, are not isolated, but part of a larger pattern in the world of Ooo. His use of spellcraft and persuasion is a human-sized reflection of the same truth that cosmic forces embody. Magic, when sung or chanted, gains a reach that words alone cannot achieve. The Ice King himself, though often seen as bumbling, carries this potential too. When he sings, his voice is awkward, even comical. But it holds the power of loneliness so raw that it almost forces empathy. Though he does not wield it with intent to control, we can imagine how easily such an emotional force could be twisted by another into manipulation. The reason music holds such sway lies in its ability to collapse distance between beings. Spoken words can be analyzed, resisted, or argued against. But a melody slips beneath thought. It creates resonance, drawing the listener into alignment with the singer. In its purest form, this is what makes Marceline's song so healing. In its twisted form, it is what makes Ash's magic so invasive. Both rely on the same pathway, bypassing reason and entering straight into feeling. The difference lies in whether the listener is invited or coerced. This is also why repetition is so important in enchantments. A repeated phrase, a steady rhythm, a circular melody, these wear down resistance, not by force, but by persistence. We see this when magical beings in Ooo chant spells again and again, each cycle deepening the hold. It mirrors the way a lullaby sung softly over and over can calm a restless child. The same method that soothes can also ensnare, depending only on the singer's heart. When we frame this in terms of Oo's broader themes, it becomes even more telling. Adventure Time has always been about the tension between freedom and control, between chaos and order. Music's dual role as comfort and command mirrors that tension perfectly. On one side, it gives voice to love, memory, and innocence. On the other, it binds, deceives, and manipulates. Both truths exist in the same notes, waiting for intent to shape them. Even the environments in Ooo reflect this ambivalence. Consider the nightosphere, a realm of chaos and fear. Sounds there often twist and echo in unsettling ways. Dissonant tones, distorted rhythms, voices stretched into eerie songs. The nightosphere is not just frightening because of its creatures, but because of its soundscape. It embodies the idea that music itself can unsettle, that tones can disturb as deeply as sights. To wander, there is to be caught in a symphony of distortion, where every echo feels like a trap. And so when we think about the darker side of music in Ooo, we are not just speaking of a few individuals like Ash or Magic Man. We are speaking of a truth woven into the fabric of the land, that music is power, and power can wound as easily as it can heal. The difference lies in intent and in the care of the one who holds the song. If we follow the threads of sound across Ooo, we begin to notice how often music and rhythm are tied to the fragile matter of trust. When a song is offered in honesty, as with Marceline's heartfelt confessions, it builds connection. But when it is twisted, as with Ash's spells or the luring whispers of enchanted places, it erodes trust instead, leaving the listener vulnerable and wounded. This fragile balance is what gives the darker side of music its haunting weight. Take, for instance, the moment when Ash tricks Marceline out of Hambo. To an outside observer, it may appear to be just another act of selfishness. Yet when we place it in the broader context of music and memory, the act becomes something heavier. Hambo was not merely a toy. It was a vessel of Marceline's earliest memories, her comfort in loneliness, her proof that she had once been loved and cared for. By enchanting her into giving it away, Ash was not just stealing an object. He was stealing the emotional truth bound within it. In that act, we see the deepest violation of music's power. It is not only manipulation of the present moment, but a rewriting of the past, an unmooring of the soul from the anchors that hold it steady. This idea extends into the way music and sound ripple across other stories in Whenever music becomes a tool for dominance rather than expression, it leaves scars that go deeper than physical wounds. Control through sound is insidious precisely because it is invisible. A character may not even realize they have been altered until long after the spell has passed. And in those quiet aftershocks, we hear the echo of a deeper theme. The fragility of free will. Adventure Time often plays with this idea in subtle ways. Characters wrestle with questions of destiny and choice, of whether their paths are written for them or made anew with each step. Music becomes one of the most delicate metaphors for this struggle. A song, once begun, carries momentum. It urges the listener forward, suggesting where the next note will fall. To resist requires effort. To surrender is easy. And this is where the danger lies, how tempting it can be to let the melody decide for us. The Ice King offers another perspective here. Though his songs are often comical, they reveal the loneliness at the heart of his character. His music does not control in the overt way Ash's spells do, but it still wields an unintentional power. Listeners feel pity, discomfort, even unease. His songs warp sympathy into something sticky, unsettling. This is another form of manipulation. Though accidental, a reminder that, even without intent, sound can change how we see others, can blur the line between truth and performance. The most powerful warning, however, lies in the way Ooo presents these darker melodies as contrasts to the gentler ones. By showing us music's shadow, the story deepens our appreciation of its light. Finn's flute is more meaningful when we have seen how Ash abuses rhythm. Marceline's heartfelt songs shine brighter against the backdrop of enchanted whispers. In this interplay, Adventure Time quietly tells us that every gift holds the possibility of misuse, and that the responsibility lies not in the gift itself, but in the heart that wields it. Perhaps this is why the series so often returns to themes of honesty and vulnerability. Songs born from truth, no matter how sad or raw, carry a kind of invulnerability against corruption. They may hurt, but they do not ensnare. Songs born from deceit, however, corrode even the sweetest melody. The difference is not always in the sound itself, but in the intent behind it. A single note of honesty can pierce through 1,000 layers of manipulation. A false song, no matter how sweet, always leaves a bitter aftertaste. And so, the darker side of music in Ooo is not only a cautionary tale about the dangers of sound, it is also a meditation on the nature of power. For what is power if not the ability to shape another's experience? And what is music if not one of the most ancient and subtle forms of that shaping? In Ooo, the two are entwined, reminding us that every song, every chant, every hum carries weight. To sing is to touch another's heart, whether gently or harshly. Throughout our journey tonight, we've wandered across many corners of Oo's soundscape. We've listened to Marceline's aching ballads, felt the pull of otherworldly voices, smiled at Finn's tender flute, and shivered at the way rhythm can be twisted into control. Yet as we draw near the end of our tale, there remains one final truth to linger on. Beyond its role as memory, beyond its use as healing, beyond even its darker shadows, music in Ooo is something even deeper. It is the language of the soul itself. This idea hums softly beneath nearly every moment where music appears in Adventure Time. The notes, the rhythms, the songs, they are never just decorative. They are never simply background noise. Instead, they are the truest way the characters reveal who they are. In a world where words often falter, where silence holds things too heavy to say aloud, music becomes the bridge. It carries the raw voice of the heart, pure and unfiltered. Consider how Marceline, who has lived through centuries of sorrow and survival, often chooses song over speech. Words might explain her pain, but they cannot embody it. When she strums her bass and lets her voice rise, the truth comes through, not just the events of her past, but the feelings themselves. Loneliness, longing, anger, love. They flow out of her, not as declarations, but as melodies, reaching others in ways that bypass explanation. Through music, Marceline speaks in the tongue of her soul. Finn's flute, too, tells his story without words. He does not always understand his own emotions, let alone know how to voice them. But when he lifts the flute to his lips, something instinctive emerges. His innocence, his grief, his stubborn hope. All these threads weave together in a sound far more eloquent than speech. It is the language of his soul in its purest form, honest and uncalculated. Even the Ice King, for all his awkwardness, reveals glimpses of the man he once was through music. His songs, often strange or silly on the surface, carry undertones of isolation so sharp they cut straight through his layers of madness. Beneath the jumbled words, the music itself speaks a truth he cannot form in conversation. In those moments, we hear not just Simon the Ice King, but Simon the lonely man, crying out through the only language left to him. Music in Ooo carries this power because it aligns with something primal. Long before words were spoken, sound existed. The hum of wind through branches, the rhythm of waves against shore, the heartbeat echoing in the chest. These are songs older than language itself. And perhaps that is why music in Adventure Time feels so deeply connected to the soul. It taps into something ancient, something universal, something beyond reason. This is also why music becomes the thread that ties characters to one another. When Marceline sings with Finn, or when Jake hums along beside him, the bond between them deepens without the need for dialogue. They are speaking in the shared language of the heart, a language that requires no translation. Music creates communion. It invites listeners into the soul of the one playing, and in that moment, barriers fall away. The idea is reflected again in the landscapes of Ooo. So many places seem to sing with their own voices, whether it's the ethereal tones of a magical forest, the haunting echoes of the nightosphere, or the cheerful hums of creatures going about their lives. These environments remind us that music is not just something characters create. It is woven into the very world they inhabit. The land itself has a soul, and it speaks in sound. And so, when we think of music as the language of the soul, we are not only looking at the characters, but at Ooo itself. Every melody in the series becomes a clue to something deeper, the longing of its people, the scars of its history, the wonder that still pulses in its soil. To listen to Ooo is to listen to a living symphony, where each character, each creature, each wind-blown tree adds their own note. Think for a moment about how music lingers. A word can fade as quickly as it's spoken, but a song has the power to echo inside us long after the notes stop. That's part of what makes music such a perfect vessel for the soul. It endures, it stays, it carries us through silence. In Ooo, this lingering quality is everywhere. Songs become not just expressions in the moment, but markers of memory, little lanterns that light the path backward or forward in time. Take Marceline and Ice King's I Remember You. The notes of that song carry across centuries, stitching together a relationship frayed by loss and madness. Simon can no longer remember the fullness of who he is, yet the music reaches into some corner of his soul where memory has not fully dimmed. Through the act of singing, something is restored, if only for a breath. That is the essence of music as soul language. It bypasses the broken parts of the mind and touches something untouchable, something eternal. Or think about Finn's flute. When he plays, it often happens quietly, almost as an afterthought in the story. Yet those moments of music become seeds planted deep within his journey. His simple melodies carry forward his innocence, so that even when the battles grow darker and the world more complex, the song reminds both him and us of who he truly is. The music becomes his soul's compass. Jake, too, often treats music as playful, like a background rhythm to his easygoing nature. But when he joins in with his brother, something profound happens. It's not about technical skill, it's about harmony. In blending voices and instruments, the two of them align not only in sound, but in spirit. That act of harmony is its own kind of soul language, a way of saying, we are together, and that togetherness matters. Music's ability to create shared memory is also reflected in the way songs spread through Ooo. When characters sing, their voices don't simply exist in isolation. Others remember, others carry the melody. And soon, the song belongs to more than just the one who began it. That's why so many moments in Adventure Time feel almost like folklore being born before our eyes. Songs become communal vessels of memory, binding not just individuals but entire groups, entire lands. In a way, the world of Ooo mirrors our own human history. Across time and cultures, songs have been how we keep stories alive, how we remember who we are. Before writing, there was song. Before books, there were chants and rhythms passed from generation to generation. Adventure Time taps into this timeless truth. When characters sing, it is not just entertainment. It is ritual. It is history. It is a sacred act of preserving the soul through sound. There is also something quietly spiritual in the way music functions in Ooo. It is not framed as belonging to any single religion or system of belief, but it holds a reverence nonetheless. To sing is to open the self, to reveal one's deepest layers. To listen is to be invited into that sacred space. This is why music often brings characters together during moments of grief or healing. It's as though the song itself becomes a kind of prayer, not to a god, but to each other. Consider how, when music is shared, the burden of one becomes lighter. Marceline singing her pain aloud is not only her catharsis. It allows those around her to step into her feelings and share the weight. When Finn plays his flute, it offers comfort not just to him but to anyone listening nearby. This quality of music, the way it creates a bridge of empathy, is perhaps the clearest sign that it is indeed the language of the soul. It is the place where individuality and togetherness meet. And perhaps this is why, even when characters are separated by vast differences, species, history, morality, music still connects them. Across barriers of time and even across dimensions, a song can slip through. Words can be misunderstood, but a melody can be felt in the bones. It speaks directly to the part of us that longs to belong, to be understood, to be heard. So in Ooo, when someone sings, they are not just entertaining. They are opening a window to their soul and letting others see inside. And when others listen, they are accepting that invitation, becoming part of the song themselves. That exchange, that gentle giving and receiving, is one of the most magical forces in the entire land. If we look closely, we see that music in Ooo often emerges at the crossroads of conflict and reconciliation. It shows up in moments when words alone are not enough, when something deeper must be spoken without being spoken. This is what makes it so powerful. It becomes a kind of universal tongue, one that even enemies cannot entirely resist. Think of Marceline and Bubblegum, for example. Their relationship is layered with history, distance, and misunderstandings, but when they share music, even the jagged edges between them seem to soften. Marceline's songs reveal truths she might never say outright. Bubblegum, often guarded and rational, listens in ways she might not otherwise allow herself. Music becomes their meeting ground, a space outside of science and strategy, where hearts speak directly. In those moments, their souls are in dialogue, even if their words fail. We see this again in Finn's journey. His melodies, played on a simple flute, often seem like small details, but their resonance reaches further than we expect. In one sense, they express his innocence and hope, but in another, they carry an energy that can calm, soothe, or remind others of gentleness. This is no small thing in a land where violence is common and survival is never guaranteed. His music, soft and unassuming, is the antidote to despair, and in that way, it becomes heroic in its own right, not through force, but through harmony. Even Jake, whose songs are sometimes silly or off the cuff, participates in this deeper rhythm. When he strums his viola or hums along with Finn, there's a casual magic at play. It shows us that music does not need to be grand to be powerful. It simply needs to be honest. His carefree tunes remind us that the soul does not only speak in sorrow or intensity. It also speaks in joy, in laughter, in the easy rhythms of daily life. But music's unifying quality extends beyond friendships and personal bonds. It even bridges gaps between worlds. Consider the nymphs' songs, which feel older than the world itself. Their melodies ripple through the forest like whispers of an ancient order, tying together nature and spirit. They don't demand translation because their meaning is felt rather than analyzed. Anyone who listens can sense their power. They remind us that music existed before kingdoms, before war, before the division of beings into categories of good or evil. It is primordial, part of the very breath of Ooo. Even darker figures are not immune to this power. Magic Man, for all his cruelty and chaos, still shows moments where song slips into his story. Ash, with his sinister use of music and spells, reminds us that even the most dangerous magic still relies on the foundations of sound and rhythm. And yet the very fact that they harness music shows us something essential. No one is beyond its reach. Music is not limited to heroes or villains, to angels or demons. It is the common thread that binds all. In fact, one of the most striking aspects of music in Adventure Time is how it collapses barriers. Time, memory, even sanity can be transcended by a song. Ice King, consumed by madness, can still find Simon for a fleeting moment when he sings. That act reminds us that beneath the layers of decay and sorrow, the soul still sings. A melody can reach through the fog where logic cannot. This is why music, more than almost anything else in the show, feels like the truest magic of Ooo. It doesn't rely on formulas, spells, or incantations. It doesn't require ingredients or tools. It simply flows from the heart. And when it is heard, it changes those who listen, whether they admit it or not. It softens anger. It awakens empathy. It reminds even the most lost soul that they are not entirely alone. Imagine yourself in that land, walking through the quiet valleys after nightfall. The sky is wide, the stars uncountable. Somewhere in the distance, a soft tune drifts on the air. You don't need to know who plays it or why. The sound itself carries meaning. You feel it stir in your chest, a gentle recognition. That is the language of the soul. It tells you that you belong, that you are connected to everything around you, that your story is part of something wider and more beautiful than you can fully see. And that is what Adventure Time's music constantly whispers. Beneath the strangeness, beneath the surreal humor, and the chaos of magic and war, there is this constant heartbeat of song. It reminds us that the soul, though fragile, is resilient. That even when kingdoms rise and fall, when heroes grow old and memories fade, the music endures. It lingers like starlight, long after the sun has set. So whether it's a single note from Finn's flute, a heartfelt cry from Marceline's bass, or the haunting call of an ancient nymph, music in Ooo always says the same thing. You are not alone. The soul is speaking. And if you listen closely, you will hear your own reflection in the song. If we step back and look at the story of Ooo as a whole, the presence of music becomes almost like an unseen narrator. It is there in the moments of triumph when characters celebrate victories with song. It is there in sorrow when melodies carry the weight of grief. It is there in quiet, in the small interludes when the plot slows and a simple tune drifts into the air like a sigh. Through it all, music does what words cannot. It holds the unspoken truths of the heart. This is why so many of the most memorable moments in Adventure Time are musical. They touch us not only because of what is happening on the screen, but because of what we feel stirring within us as the music plays. The show invites us into its world not by explaining, but by letting us hear, letting us feel. A melody does not need translation. It goes directly to the soul, and in that way, it is universal. We could think of music as Oo's greatest form of magic, one that requires no training or bloodline. Anyone can sing. Anyone can hum a tune. Even the smallest character, with no armies or powers, can change the atmosphere with a song. This democratization of magic is one of the show's gentlest truths. That power does not always come from might, but from expression, honesty, and vulnerability. And if we listen carefully, the lessons extend far beyond the borders of that fantastical land. In our own lives, music weaves through everything. We use it to celebrate, to mourn, to remember. A song can transport us back to a childhood memory or carry us forward into hope for the future. Just as in Ooo, it becomes the bridge between the seen and the unseen, the conscious and the subconscious, the individual and the collective. It is no accident that bedtime itself is so often marked by song. Across cultures and generations, lullabies have carried children into dreams. Soft rhythms and gentle melodies reassure us that we are safe, that we can let go, that we can drift into the unknown of sleep with trust. Adventure Time, in its quiet way, taps into this ancient truth. Its songs are not always lullabies, but they all carry that same function, to cradle the soul, to remind us of connection, to guide us gently into mystery. Even the darker uses of music in Ooo, the spells and enchantments, remind us of its immense power. To control another being through song is frightening, but it is also a shadow of the truth that music does influence us deeply. It changes moods, shifts energies, and shapes memory. That duality, music as healing and music as danger, reflects the very heart of magic itself. It is never neutral, but always powerful, always transformative. What makes the songs of Ooo so special is how sincerely they are offered. Whether it is Marceline confessing her loneliness through her bass, or Finn and Jake goofing off with a playful duet, or a mystical being weaving spells through melody, The songs are never empty. They are full of soul. They remind us that sincerity is the key to magic, that what matters most is not technical perfection, but truth. And perhaps that is the lesson we carry with us after watching, after listening, after drifting off to sleep with these stories in our minds. Music is always there, ready to meet us where we are. It does not demand, it simply invites. It does not judge, it simply resonates. It does not speak in complicated language, but in tones and vibrations that all hearts can understand. So as we close this exploration of Oo's music, let's pause to reflect on what we've uncovered. Music is memory. Music is healing. Music is a weapon and a shield. It is laughter and sorrow, joy and grief. It is the language of the soul, flowing through every corner of Adventure Time and, in truth, through every corner of our own world as well. Perhaps the next time you hear a quiet song, whether it comes from a radio, a loved one humming nearby, or even just the wind through the trees, you might think of Ooo. You might think of Marceline, of Finn, of Ice King, of the countless beings whose souls spoke through melody. And you might recognize for just a moment that this same magic is alive in you. And that recognition is its own kind of spell, a reminder that we are never truly separate, that the song connects us all across time, space, and memory. It is the soft voice of the universe itself, whispering that we belong. So let the music carry you now as you drift deeper into rest. Feel it wrap around you like a blanket, gentle and sure. Know that, just like in Ooo, you are part of a song much bigger than yourself, and that song will never fade. Good night.